Okay, we have reached 6 p.m. I declare the meeting, just a joint meeting between the planning commission and the village board to order. Let's rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we're gonna do the roll call. The time we're gonna have a village board, just do a roll call, bullets with an I. So Mike, you can start us off. I, Frank is not here. I don't know if he's coming or, but I do know that trustee Lancaster is excused, so, let's make sure that the minutes for this meeting has him as excused, so. Tammy, you can go ahead and do the planning commission report.
Planning commission will do the same and then just indicate you're present with an I. So Tammy Crusetto, I.
Dennis Bushwhacker, aye.
Like I.
Scott Chicoine, aye.
Jim Havens, aye.
Thomas Eichenberg, I.
Mark Brett Hefty, aye.
Okay, next on the agenda is identify potential conflict of interest. This is something new that we're adding to our meetings so that if there is any potential conflicts of interest, it would be encouraging to members of the planning commission and the village board to identify those before proceeding. So if there, does anyone have any potential conflicts of interest? If not, then we will proceed to the public comments.
So there's a list in front, I don't know if we can, folks that are on that list are interested in speaking now or wait to a specific item under the.
Let's do it now. So first up, we have Scott Schwartz.
It's related to specific items later on in the meeting. Why did you want to discuss it now?
Well, we have a public comment period because Robert's Rules of Order want to make sure that,
That's why you want me to come up there?
yeah,
Okay.
not discouraging you from being able.
No, that's fine. It's the first time I'm doing this, so, yeah. All right, make sure everybody can hear. Is it good? All right. Hi, my name is Scott Schwartz. I live at N8396 Muirfield Way. It's in the North Shore Estates subdivision, which is south of the proposed subdivision that is going up against you guys right now at this commission meeting. There's two items I'm kind of concerned about. I'm not against anything. I'm just concerned about some of the mapping that was done. I work for the Sheriff's Department 911 full-time, been there 31 years, so I know that intersections can make a difference when it comes down to accidents. So the proposed subdivision, that mapping is on there if you guys want to take a look at it. Across the road, there's a subdivision on North Shore Road, and what they did was they staggered the road entrances. You stagger road entrances that close to each other, it's a recipe for accidents that are going to happen, especially with bus stops, with people walking. North Shore Road gets walked a lot, so that is one of my concerns as far as the entrances of that new subdivision that's proposed. I don't understand why the subdeveloper didn't run them out to Old Highway Road. Old Highway Road is the intended route of travel for everybody that's coming out of it. Why are you running that new subdivision in turn with the other two subdivisions that are back there, all on the North Shore Road, causing a traffic congestion at North Shore and Old Highway Road? So I think the developer maybe, or the planning commission should maybe look at that and maybe see if there's an alternative route of travel that they could exit on Old Highway Road. If they were on both roads out there, it'll create less congestion at the intersection of North Shore and Old Highway Road. So that's just one of the concerns. The second concern I had was if that goes through as far as the entrances going on North Shore Road. I don't know if anybody of you has taken a ride down Old Highway Road or North Shore Road. I know the village is working very hard at trying to keep up with road maintenance. if you're gonna run 65 houses back in that subdivision, that's a minimum of 2 vehicles extra, 130 vehicles that are gonna run them roads. 65 houses are gonna go in that subdivision. Is the developer, I think the village should really look into, is the developer gonna be responsible for repairing that roads when they come in there with other construction equipment on North Shore Road or Old Highway Road? Old Highway Road's in disrepair already. Like I said, I don't know if anybody's taken a ride down in front of that. It is tore up bad. I think it's still the old highway road from when it was a highway road. So, North Shore Road, if you're gonna run all those vehicles, whether it be construction equipment or just traffic alone, is gonna tear up those roads. I think the village should look into the developer, if they're gonna run that through there and run the development inside of there, the village should look at taxing or making the developer pay for new road, because they're gonna tear it up. It's worse, it's bad already, and I don't think it's on the future plan for any redo, but I could be wrong with the new path that's gonna be going through there. I'm not sure if that's,
Isn't Old Highway Road supposed to be redone?
Yeah, so I can address both. Of them.
okay,
Interesting enough, Old Highway Road is in the DOT right of way. So the DOT would never allow for roads to come out onto that Old Highway Road. We've had that discussion and that's out.
okay,
And that's why the roads come out into the shore one. The Old Highway Road, we just finished the survey work. It will be designed this year, constructed, reconstructed next year. It's actually gonna be shipped closer to 11410 for a pathway to go in there on the south side of the road.
okay,
We have talked about the impacts of this road and the future need for milling this off and repaving it. And the discussion we bring up about who should pay for it is definitely one that we're having.
okay.
And it's on our radar as to how we standardize.
Good, good. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so that's essentially, I guess I could bring it up, I guess, I don't think the village is kind of looking at population wise as far as houses and stuff like that. Take a look at 65 houses. I'm not sure exactly what the acreage is per house that's gonna be going in there, but there are 65 houses a lot within that land frame. Maybe the village should start looking at minimum of half acre lots for new development, so you're not cramming everybody in. It's not looking so populated and kind of get away from your rural feel, but that's just my opinion on that, so. But that's all I have. I appreciate everybody's time and thank you for listening.
Sorry, really bad at reading signatures here. Is it? Brooke,
Brooke.
Brooke?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Brooke Ruck. I live on N8526 North Shore Road. I'd like to talk about what we were just talking about with the subdivision as well. My property will be butting up to the back of where that property is going to be being looked at. I also don't have any, concerns overall. Sort of the comments that were already made, 65 lots kind of seems like a lot in that space. My main concern is looking at the wetland kind of map. It wasn't on the original map of the development. Concern is kind of looking at just specifically lot 63. If you're looking at that map, the driveway is running between our property and the property next to us, and is in considerable area with wetlands. I know it's something that's probably the DNR and not necessarily you guys look at, but something just to consider as far as what happens to that runoff water. The high point of that property, we've lived at this property for 18 years, so we've seen a lot of water and rain over years. And the high points.
Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
We're in a different map, like we updated.
Okay.
Is it a lot of towns concerned though?
No, it would be,
The numbers are.
oh, the numbers are different. Okay. All right, so we'd be looking at lot then 35 on the new updated map there. So that area there is kind of the high point, and looking at, who's responsible for water. It sounds like, I know we've had some emails prior, but it would be our responsibility for water runoff if there were to be a problem in the future after this development is put into place as far as water in our backyard or in our property. And just kind of looking at some of those lots, they're taking up quite a bit of wetland space, and just kind of putting into consideration, what does that runoff look like in the future? with all of those lots in there and, where that watershed is being displaced, would be something to consider. Previously noted as well, we also had a concern about the entrance of the drives, and not matching up with the subdivision across the street. There is a lot of walking on North Shore, and just the concern of, what that looks like with all of the, increased amount of residents that would be coming to the area. Also noting the speed on the street with the increase of traffic. With the private golf course on the end, not everyone abides by the speed limit down that street. And there is at times vehicles that drive extremely fast, don't stop at the railroad tracks. And just again, concerns with lots of children, lots of people walking their dogs and things like that on the road. It's just a concern with adding this many to that subdivision area. Just a concern for those already in the neighborhood. And then the last thing was talking about in the proposal, talked about North Shore Golf Course being an area that's used for public and within walking distance. I think that's a little bit misleading. It's a private golf course, so unless someone's going to pay to go there. So looking at maybe a park or something, I know that the expansion of the trail, it would be nice to have just something small even for the residents to be able to utilize. Because there are so many houses in that back space. And if we're adding a trail along Old Highway 114, might be something to consider as well. Just adding in a space that's public for people to come and use as they're also using that trail. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we got Jeff, is it Lunik? Yeah. Lunik.
Yeah, I don't think I checked off when I was gonna speak.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can speak if you want. I mean,
If you want to, you're more than welcome to. Okay, if there's any other public comments, we'll move on to comprehensive plan update stuff.
Sure, we do that. Can we get a motion on the minutes for the planning commission from March 18, 2025 in basic? The planning commission members?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from March 18th, 2025. Planning Commission minutes as printed and circulated.
I will second that. And since we're the only old members, it's a really helps.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'll be abstaining as I was not on the commission.
Thank you. Now we can move on to that. Sure. So before we, so Mitch is a consultant with SRF Consulting, has been working with us for over a year now on updating the village's comprehensive plan and future land use map. So he's gonna review some of the findings of the public meeting that we had back in March and some of the changes that have been recommended to, and then be interested in hearing from you folks if you have anything further. So there is a PowerPoint. There's slides on your desk if you can follow along that way, and then the public can judge on the board behind them. Go ahead.
All right, thanks, Chad. Thanks, Planning Commission and Village Board. I appreciate that everyone's here tonight. Like Chad said, my name is Mitch Browse. I am a planner with SRF Consulting Group. I know and have met some of you, so others of you. It's good to meet you all, and thank you for your time tonight. Like Chad said, we've been working for about a year on updating this plan. The most important part of this process has been developing an updated future land use map and future land use plan to help guide decision-making regarding development and just land use throughout all of the village. And so, like Chad said, I do have some slides if you want to flip to the second page. What we want to do is take a few minutes to walk through some of the responses we heard from the engagement events we held earlier this year. And then we'll just walk through some of the changes that we made to the draft map based on the comments that we heard. And then, like Chad said at the end, we'd like to hear from you all about whether or not there are additional changes that we should be making to the plan, or if there's other comments and things that we need to be making sure that we're thinking about and addressing here. And so if we go ahead and jump to the third slide, like mentioned, in March of this year, we did have an open house, in this room. We had 74 people attend, and most of them stayed for, almost the full 2 hours, with lots of great discussion. We had large maps, on either side of the room that people could stand around, ask questions, write on. And then we also had a map, an online map available, that people were able to look, and we could zoom in on specific parcels and specific parts of the village, using that map. What we encouraged everyone who attended that to do was to fill out a survey. We provided that survey both online and in paper forms, so that hopefully it was as accessible as possible for folks. And we received 106 responses, and that includes both online and written format. So we compiled all of those responses, and included in your packets is kind of an overview of the responses that we received, trying to highlight some of the key themes we heard. And then also, I believe you have actually the full responses in there and yourself in your packets as well. And so you can see every response that was received, and that, as we typically do, all of that will kind of be compiled up into an appendix. Will go included with the plan as part of the adoption process, so that there is kind of a record of the responses that. And so if we go ahead and jump onto the next slide, you'll see a table and a graph. Essentially, we asked like 3 questions in the survey. We asked, how do you feel about the land use map as it was presented? We asked people what changes they'd make, and then if they just had other general comments about the plan. And so you can see from this, we did receive a fairly substantial number of negative comments about the plan. One of the things that we were able to do then with the next questions is try to figure out what concerns did people have about the map. And our goal was then to, again, compile those into themes and try to identify how can we change this map to make it one that people can live with and the one that people can be happy about. And so if we jump to the next slide, you'll see the themes that we heard. And so in the packet, we've identified each of these themes. We've identified, generally what those comments said. That helped us get to the conclusion that that was a theme. And then we also tallied up the number of responses that we felt kind of aligned with the overall statement. And so we heard comments in support for and comments against some of the medium density and higher density residential areas that were identified on the future land use map. In particular, we had 38 responses against those. Some of those higher and medium density residential areas, and you'll see in some of the changes we made to the map, we tried to address that very directly. We did hear 12 people respond that they were generally in support of medium and high density, mostly medium density residential. The types of things that they made sure they commented were location needs to be appropriate. And then kind of inside of those comments, there was some concern about housing cost and then trying to provide a diversity of housing. And so we saw a little bit of both there. But again, 12 responses generally positive, 38 responses generally negative. We had 5 responses that specifically called out senior housing and the need for more senior housing throughout the village. We had a lot of comments generally in favor of ag preservation and protection of rural character. We know that while a portion of Harrison is urbanizing, it's still a very ag and rural community as a whole. And so people clearly wanted to make sure that that was embraced as a part of this plan. And so again, you'll hopefully see some changes that we made to the map based on those comments. And then we heard kind of an equal number of comments in favor of commercial industrial development and against commercial industrial development. People who were against commercial industrial development generally said they had concerns about the traffic that would be created. Those who were in favor wanted to have it be more convenient to be able to go and access retail goods and stores and services and things like that. They said that it made sense to try to take advantage of some of the key corridors with higher levels of traffic to try to locate some more commercial type uses. And then finally, we did receive a number of comments that generally say, express concern about slowing down, stopping, development over time. I think some of that's reflected by the fact that Harrison has grown so rapidly over the last 10 years. And the hope was that through this plan, we could try to be a little bit more deliberate with where that type of growth is located and how much land is eaten up by it. And so, like I said, everything that we received, all the comments we received have been compiled. You do have them access in your packets. Um, like I said, we worked with Chad and Josh to actually then amend the map based on those comments. So I'll stop and just see if there's any general responses to the survey, the open house, any of the responses we may have heard or you may have seen.
So my only question is. The number of responses, is that typical in these kind of activities or were we expecting more?
It's a really hard question to answer. I think if we get triple digits at an event or 75 people at the event, that's pretty good at events. It's getting harder and harder to get people to come and engage in these types of things, these types of activities. One thing I applaud the village did is that the village sent out a postcard to every single property in the village to try to get the word out as much as we could. I think we're also working with the county currently. We've had much less engagement than that in the county process. We had very similar types of open houses for them and did not see even close to the amount of people involved. And so, I think generally I was happy with how many people showed up and how many people provided comments. And it's of course a small fraction of the number of people who live here. And we always want more, but in general, I think it was a fairly good response rate.
Great, thank you.
This will be 2025 presentation.
Yeah. Yes. I'm just 1 year behind. Apologies. So I think the next thing we'll do is we'll just kind of go through some of those changes again, trying to keep those key themes in mind as we update the maps. And so if you jump to the next slide on your packet, you'll start to see maps show up. And what I tried to do here was just kind of capture the specific changes. In your packets as well, we've got written descriptions of all of the changes we made. On the packets, you'll see each of the changes was coded with a letter, and that corresponds to a line in the table included in the packets, kind of describing why changes were made and what we tried to address. The other thing we've done is we've tried to compile comment numbers that apply to each of the kind of key and main changes we made. And then if you go even further down, you'll see all of the comments submitted, and we coded each of those with the specific map change so that we could kind of see how each of these comments was being responded to as a part of the map updates. And so the first thing we did when we sat down with Chad and Josh was we looked at this area to kind of the western portion of the existing developed area in Harrison. You'll see on the left-hand side, we had a fairly large swath of land in medium density residential future land use category. Essentially what that is 4 to 8 units per acre. It would allow single family dwellings, but it would also allow, duplexes, in some cases fourplexes within that 4 to 8 units per acre category. Hearing the responses, people had concern about the loss, especially of this area, potential loss of this agricultural land. And so knowing that much of that was intended to be very long-term growth, likely outside of the 20-year timeframe of this plan, we thought it made sense to actually pull that back and try to concentrate the development first in those areas where there's direct access to services, sewer, water. And then in the future, potentially this area that was removed from the medium density residential area and the transitional area may come in once that more near area is able to be developed. The idea being anything that develops within the sewer service area should be able to connect directly into services without substantial cost to the village to extend those services. If we jump to our next slide, we're just moving a little bit west of where we are located. These are parcels that fall kind of between west of State Park Road over to No Road. We did have a number of comments that specifically called out No Road, and so that's why we kind of use that as indicator on the western side.
Call it
Noe, oh, apologies.
That's okay.
I'm trying my best to learn, but I appreciate knowing the correct way. So Noe Road. And so you'll see within the red box on the screen, we have eliminated much of the medium density residential in that area and converted that to a low density residential. So that'd be primarily single family homes. There could be some two-family dwellings or duplexes in those areas, but we're looking primarily at single-family type of neighborhoods.
Can you give me the logic behind I'm gonna call it a smaller parcel, I know it's not a small parcel,
Mhm.
but the smaller parcel that was left as commercial, the
Um,
majority of it was changed to low density residential. As you're looking at the corner of, I think it's State Park and Highway 10. Is that existing
Yeah.
commercial there?
that,
Is that why it maintained commercial?
sorry, can you say that again one more time? Apologies.
When you're looking at um. The shift between mixed density residential over to low density residential,
Yes.
you have the portion the whole bottom portion was commercial originally.
Mhm.
And you maintained a small piece on the right side that stays commercial on the corner of State Park and Highway 10. Is there a reason that stayed commercial when everything else shifted?
So you're looking at the blue there, is that?
Yep.
So that's actually the transitional category.
Oh, I thought it was the light.
Yeah, no, but sometimes the colors are hard, especially when we're printing them out and seeing different screen, because it's also very hard to tell on the screen. And so that's kind of a future term growth area. It's not served by any services currently. But once that, if that low density residential area to the west of it develops, it may have direct access to services. It's on State Park Road and 10, and so we didn't want to take it out, put it as ag, because it kind of completed the picture out to that area. But the understanding was that if that develops anytime in the near future, it probably wouldn't be able to connect into services immediately. But it would need to be designed and developed in such a way that once services reach, they could connect and be as part of the larger service area. And so that's kind of more of a planned service area from the utility providers.
And what is the definition of transitional residential?
Let me grab that for you. The definition of transitional area are areas identified for future residential development where public water and sanitary sewer is anticipated in the future. Any development in that area should be phased consistent with anticipated service extension. And if it occurs in advance of that service extension, it should occur in such a way that it can be transitioned to public sanitary sewer and water systems once those systems reach that property. So it's within the planned service area, but it couldn't connect if it developed today. Yes.
I do have a question, and it relates to probably the slide before, but.
Yep.
In the section, first of all, I appreciate that State Park and east of that is, deemed to stay ag, but what if a landowner wants to sell their property? What do we do if this is zoned, or if this is the future land use map says it's agricultural?
So the future land use map comes into play when somebody would like to rezone their property. And so if someone were to sell that land that's identified as agriculture, and they would come into Chad and Josh and say, what can I do with this land? Chad and Josh would have to look at the future land use plan, and they say it's identified as ag. It needs to be consistent with that ag land use, and the zoning needs to be consistent with that. If it shows up as a residential use, it could be rezoned consistent with the plan. It could be developed consistent with the standards in the zoning ordinance. But if it shows up as ag, it can be zoned to ag, but it can't be zoned out of ag until the map changes.
So the process would be we would have to update the comprehensive plan.
Yes, yep, if you wanted to change that, you'd be able to amend the plan. One,
Similar action can be done through a variance.
no, it's a different process than that.
It's a public engagement process where publishing of notices and doing 30-day periods of receiving comment and all this.
So yeah, so state law says, you know, Village of Harrison has zoning, state law says you have to have a plan. And your zoning needs to be consistent with that plan. And so that doesn't necessarily mean you need to go and change all your zoning to what this plan says. It just means that when someone comes in and requests a change to their property, you should be looking at what your plan says and you should be making a decision based on. There can be a process to amend comprehensive plans and, you know, interim, is kind of like what we're doing now. And many communities do that if they have an opportunity that was unforeseen and there is some greater, you know, public good. And so the communities do amend their plan when they have opportunities. You know, but for the most part, this is the guide for zoning decisions. All right, so if we jump to the next slide, we'll take one step to the west. This is kind of looking on Highway N, kind of north of Manitowoc Road. Let me pull up my notes on this one again quick. If I can find them.
This is the Driscoll Development Site across from Woodland School that goes up to Midway. That's planned out to be high density all the way to Midway at this point.
Yes. Yep. Thank you, Shadow. Lost my notes. And so what we've done here is currently in the initial plan, much of this area was shown as commercial.
No, this is.
One ahead. Okay. This is
Harrison Commerce Park.
yes.
I'm telling in Manitowoc, and we're getting building permits.
And so, you know, we had it as commercial all the way up, except for in that area where the village center kind of is going to be. We opted to change that to the mixed use designation because that adds a lot more flexibility. And so the commercial district would allow commercial uses, would allow commercial zoning. A mixed use designation could allow commercial, it could allow residential, it could allow both of those. And so what it does is preserve some flexibility for the village to kind of take advantage of what opportunities come in that area. Obviously, the village is making a substantial investment in that area, and it's likely to spur some activity land use wise along County Road N. And so by including this as a mixed use, someone came in and said, I want to put a commercial development in here. That would be consistent with the plan. But they could also put in residential units, or they could put in both on the same lot. And so it would provide a lot more flexibility into, directly around the investment that the village is making. All right. Next is the one that Chad just alluded to. And so this is the corner of North Co-op Road and Manitowoc Road. This is an area that we had identified as mixed use. In conversations with Chad and Josh, we realized that that large parcel that's now showing as brown on the right map is currently being developed. And so we wanted to make sure that the future land use plan was consistent with what was expected to happen in that area.
How many units per acre in a high density zone?
It is between 6 and 15 units per acre. So we're looking at everything from, single family all the way up to smaller scale apartments. The idea being that there should be kind of a mix of those types of uses.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that area is already zoned.
It's already zoned for multi-family. Yes.
Yeah, so this is just consistent with the existing zoning and the existing plants there. Next, we have parcels on Black Oak Streets, Sunny Drive and Woodland Road. What we've done here is just change those from high density residential to medium density residential. The thought process there was trying to make it a little bit more of a transition from the single family neighborhood to the north as we get to the higher density to the south and the west. And so that the general idea was that instead of having high density right next to low density, we have more of a natural progression between the two and a little bit of buffer. And then the last item we have on the slides today is at the corner of Highway 114 and County Road N. You can see there's one light purple parcel on the left-hand side that I believe is currently being used commercially. Chad, that's correct. And we received some comments, and one of the things that we shared with the group is that we tried to identify commercial opportunities around some of these key intersections along some of the more higher traffic roads. And with this being, you know, a recent investment, obviously in the roundabout, there's existing commercial along that corridor. It made sense to kind of expand it all the way to County Road and to kind of complete the corner there. And then I didn't provide maps for this one, but the last one that's in your packet is we've, you know, updated a few parcels on Michaela Drive, changed to preservation open space just because they were, you know, existing stormwater retention ponds, which was kind of the way that we identified those areas within existing developments. If there was a open space, retention pond, stormwater facilities, those would often show up as open space on the plan. So that was just be consistent with the remainder of them. And so what I wanted to do before I kind of stop and, you know, hear your guys' comments is just talk a little bit about kind of the overall acreages of the different categories we see on the land use map. The agricultural category is about 58 or 57.5% of full acres in the village show up as agricultural in the future land use category. We have about 15% as low density, just under 5.5% parks and recreation, just under 5% is commercial, and then about 4.2% of the acres as medium density residential. And so we tried to stay kind of true to the spirit that the urban part of Harrison is located in the north and the western portion of the village, where the remainder of the village is still very agricultural and very rural. And so most of that land has been identified as agriculture. You'll see we have some like rural residential mixed in to kind of reflect existing uses, but the majority of that land is intended to stay for agricultural purposes, kind of consistent with its historic use, and make sure that any development that occurs as growth continues to happen in the village, we're trying to locate it in a responsible area where it has access to sewer and water and is in closer connection with the remainder of the developed portion of the village.
What was the percentage for high density residential?
High density residential, we're at just under 1%, about 189 acres total. So I will go ahead and stop there. Open it up to the group, see if there's any comments, discussions. I think we wanted to hear if there were outstanding concerns, outstanding changes that people would like to see to the future land use map. I think this is a great time to be able to hopefully discuss those and identify some changes that are needed.
I think before we go on, I think we should probably have a chat, walk through the process from here on out, just so that everybody can understand where we're at and where we're going and what the timeline is on this before we dive into some of the comments.
Sure, so we're hoping to able to get enough comments from folks that in the June meeting of the planning commission and the board, we can come back with a draft of the text part of the document that's pretty well done and have a map that everybody can kind of agree on, and be able to take a preliminary approval at that point, that what we present at that point is pretty much wrapped up. Then by ordinance, we need a 30-day public comment period for the future land use map, another 30 days. So we will then publish the note and then that would be at the July meetings. If we don't get a lot of comments that, change it and everybody feels on board with it, then we look for adoption of the plan, which includes the map, at the July meeting.
I was just thinking, we're gonna have. In July, we're gonna have a. Open house, basically, should we maybe promote? The comprehensive plan comment period during, because that'll fall in that 30-day review,
You mean the listening session?
yeah.
Yes, we could keep that on there. Provided we get kind of favorable feeling from both groups at the June meetings.
Right.
The other comment I just have is, the document, so what we did is we took the 2017 version of the document and we weren't doing a complete rewrite because we're not required to do it every 10 years. You're supposed to do an update, but the statute doesn't say what an update is. It just said you need to update it. So instead of spending a lot of money and time on really getting all the text up to date, we're kind of changing demographic data and getting that up to date and not doing a complete rewrite of the plan and really focusing in on the future land use map because that's where the decision making kind of rests. So what we did is we took the 2017 plan and kind of use that as the basis, and we will get the page numbers and all that kind of stuff in there, all kind of updated. But I just wanted to give kind of a rough draft of it to the two committees, that if there is anything that in the next couple of weeks that you see that sticks out, reach out to me, send me an email, make sure we address it so that when we come back in June, we have your comments incorporated. But there is we're working with the county and updating some of the mapping and stuff, so that's why it's kind of disjointed at this point, but the June edition will be pretty much the final edition.
So that'll roll out with the planning commission in June.
And then to the board in June.
Okay, I'm gonna open it up to the rest of the board, Mike.
On slide D, I heard Chad say multi-family in the corner of Midway and Dewey. That's a little bit cool.
That's already approved. That's the district.
That's just the last time. 2020. Okay. So we're SOL in that.
Pretty much.
Thank you. I do have a question. I know that the respondents it was a very small level of respondents for the senior housing, and I'm kind of dog with the bone on this one, but only 5 people. But when I look at the economic survey that we economic development, we had 60% ask for it. So I know that there hasn't been an appetite for it necessarily, but I just feel like with the level of public input that we've gotten, that we owe folks some kind of an answer, like, yes, we're willing to do this in the years ahead, or absolutely not. We're not in the move right now or for the next 5 years or whatever it is. So I don't know. Do you have any comment on that? But there's a need and there's a lot.
Yeah. No, I mentioned that we only had 5 comments in this survey about senior housing. I don't believe that that is any indication that people don't think that that's a need, because I did see what was reflected in the survey that was done last year, that was something that people had serious, real concerns about. I think it was just the people who thought of it when they were submitting this survey, because nothing in the materials we gave them directly stated senior housing. I think there's a number of ways to address senior housing. There's of course larger senior housing kind of apartment style developments that we see in a lot of places. But there's also policies that people can do to help allow people to age in place and to convert their existing housing to something zero entry and have, tubs and facilities in their bathrooms that can allow them to stay in their homes long term. And so, I think the senior housing idea fits really well into the kind of general medium density category that we included in the comprehensive plan or in the draft map. Where you could have kind of cottage style senior housing, you could have a little bit more dense senior housing. And so while the plan and the map specifically doesn't call out areas for senior housing, anything that's slightly higher density does fit well within that type of use. Any of those mixed use areas would be good areas for senior type housing. I believe that there are a number of objectives and policies within the plan that call for the village to take action to help encourage the creation of more senior housing within the village. And so, you know, the map itself doesn't say here's a senior housing area because we can't really do that. But it does create a number of locations where we see the higher and the medium density that would be a good fit, where senior housing would fit well within those areas. My hands are just a little bit tied to some extent to the developers that come and the type of housing they want to build.
Thank you. Piggybacking senior housing piece, I think that's another reason for the proposed change on N north of Manitowoc by making that mixed use, depending on what develops around that, you know, say civic development with the potential village buildings and what commercial or business opportunities present there. That could also leave room for senior housing within walking distance to what some of those developments are to make it nicer for the aging community.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that location to stuff, services, goods, the the village civic center, those kind of areas are areas where we want senior housing. We want to make sure that it's in areas where they can access the things they need to survive without having to get in the car and drive in traffic and go up to Appleton. And so I think it's important to be pretty deliberate with where those uses are located to give them transportation options and access to everyday goods and services.
So if I may, since trustee Lancaster is at a fire training event today, I just want to share his comments for the public record. He believes that there's medium density housing around Hayden and in addition west of all the way to the western village limits, and based on public feedback, I believe all the medium density darker orange should be completely removed from the plan, and the medium density area should be replaced with low density residential. And number two, the three area, I'm not quite sure what I mean, but anyway, currently marked as red mixed use on the map across off Midway across from the Appleton Industrial Park, along County Canyon by Amy and Hyde line should be changed to commercial. Mixed use for the definition applies and be multifamily and people do not want.
And I would disagree with his statements on number two, because mixed use allows it to still be commercial and allows it to have other potential uses like we just discussed with senior housing and things of that based on what the development brings and what interested developers come. Just because it's mixed use does not mean that you have to put up large apartment complexes. It means it's one of multiple options available to you based on what makes sense for the community.
I had a comment, just that as you kind of continue to build out these, from a planning standpoint, I didn't notice really anything from like a parks and recreation standpoint. I know we have a lot of parks in the village, but right, like as you're looking further out to the east, some feedback has been, we're gonna need some of that out here. So what's the thought process, I guess, behind that?
Yeah, so just generally at this level, it's really hard for us to identify parks that aren't already parks purchased and owned or land that's purchased and owned by the village.
Right.
One that makes it very hard if you say this is going to be a park and the village is going to buy it, makes it very hard for the village to actually do that because they can lose any negotiation power that may exist in that stuff. The other thing, and I'm going to turn to Chad and Josh on this one, the village does have policies in place that require developers to pay a fee in lieu of or provide parkland, correct?
Yes.
For their developments to make sure that they are either providing the parkland to serve the people that are going to live in that development, or they're providing money to the village to go out, purchase and build those plans that would accommodate the additional population that comes from the development. So while there's not parks identified on this map, new parks, the policies that the village has in place will ensure that those parks do occur and are created consistent with standards that are necessary with population growth and things like
So
that.
there's no concern of like, say, a developer comes in, it's a mixed use, ends up being single family home. We would have something, they wouldn't have to get rezoned as a park, whatever, we'd go through those policies and they would have to put one in, so, okay, thank you.
Tom, against the comments?
Okay, just a few questions. I see, you know, a lot of different properties are involved here. How many of the existing owning property owners have been consulted, talked to directly before designating any of this? Have you sat down with any of the property owners? I mean, there's probably,
By state law, we're not required to, we're not changing we're not taking any private property rights away from them. This is just a future plan that this is what the village sees as their 20-year growth pattern. If they want to sell off their land for commercial, they have to come talk to us and go through the process in order to do that. We're not taking away anybody's rights to what they can and cannot do with their plan. We're just saying as the village grows, this is the kind of developments that we're looking for the future, and we're required to do that by state statute. Now, we did have an open house. We sent a postcard to every property in the village. And if the people wanted to be heard, they could come to the open house, they could submit the survey, they could come and talk to us and you know, versus we're not required to go and meet with every property owner for what we're proposing to designate the property to by law. We don't have to do that as long as we have a means for them to provide public comment, which we did.
so, and so what I guess I'm hearing here is that even though we do designate or put this in, there is a process to change this
Oh, yeah.
in the future. It's not,
It's like a weasel.
yes, okay, so. Just want to make sure that, and then the other comment was looking at the existing sewer service area. So it goes, if I'm looking at this right, is the Delaware Sanitary District serving up to Highway 10 at State Park Road, down State Park to Schmidt, over to 55, and then down toward the intersection there at 55. Is that currently in their service area? Or is that
It's in their future service area,
Okay.
and utilities are there today.
Yeah, okay, so that is in their area. They don't have to have that their request for more area to get that area done.
Yes.
Okay.
Likewise, Harrison Utilities can serve somewhere between fire lane 12 and fire lane 13. They can't get all the way to pretty much where the transitional ends on fire. Is where Harrison Utilities future area could serve as well.
Okay.
I know we've talked about this a little bit already from like the Delaware Sanitary District, but as you're kind of looking further out, was like Delaware Sanitation, what were they like talked to and like understood like what our plan or goal is, and if they wouldn't be able to supply what's needed for this development, or are we just kind of gonna see what happens and then make those calls when it comes? I guess I'm just trying to understand that.
So both Harrison Utilities and Darboy Sanitary District, there's a sewer service area that's mapped out and approved by the DNR as to where they can ultimately, so that really hinders where any development future can happen. And that's kind of what you would see on some of these areas, as Tom just said. Some of these areas north of 10 in that agriculture area are in the sewer service area. There's no utilities there today. Some of those, you know, whether they can be served with gravity sewer, I don't know. The Darboy Sand hasn't historically invested in lift stations to move sanitary sewer, so that has to be factored in. Now, we try to look at future growth patterns of the village, where those, where that sewer service area is. and use kind of that as the basis, but there's a lot of variables in that. So whether we, get in an agreement with Darkway Sand or Harrison Utilities, really it's the land use. And they're gonna have to see what as the development happens, the developer's gonna have to see where they can get utilities from and at what cost it's gonna be to service their development.
Okay, thank you.
It's kind of an after the fact, Joey, if you will.
No, I appreciate it.
But I do want to emphasize that we looked very closely at the sewer service areas as we put together the maps. Trying to keep cognizant that any development that's not agricultural falls within those areas. So it should be able to go on to sewer service in collaboration with those entities.
So as we update this comprehensive plan, are we maybe more, Chad, are we benchmarking what this update, what our rules are for residential, so that we don't run into the current situation where we have so much residential? I feel like we've already met our goal from that prior version. I guess maybe for me, I would like to understand, and the people have commented, slow down the growth. When is enough enough? Because I've heard comments, how big do we want to be? Is there, or maybe it's more a decision by the board as far as how big do we want to be? I mean, we're gonna go through this again probably another 5 years, but I would like to see on here, what is our goal? What do we want to be in the future? Is it just the land use map? Is it number of thousands of people over the next how many years? Is it how much revenue? What's our goal? Is it based on population? Is it based on assessed value? Is it? I guess I'm trying to understand.
All of that stuff. And I think if you want to benchmark, I think we're gonna have to have a separate discussion over kind of what the goal, what the goals are and where the development happens. But as I talked to a number of the planning commission members, I've heard from a lot of the new ones that, they realize that, we need to have some development to keep building the revenues. I mean, but I guess the question of how much is a policy decision.
I would think the goal would be smart, sustainable development.
Correct.
And that's what this map should guide.
Correct.
We should be going at a pace that aligns with this map where we're not looking at breaking huge parts of agricultural area into something else and allow this to guide our smart, sustainable development and making sure as the committees and the boards are making decisions, they align with this document versus making decisions and then just changing it. Because I think there were some thoughtful changes made based on citizen feedback of what the public of Harrison would like to see and doesn't want to see. And if you use this as your guiding force in those decisions, it should answer some of those other questions you presented as to what is the development and what does it look like in a timely manner.
Yeah, I agree with what Tammy said. I think the slides that we were just presented here with the modifications are a very good first step. I think we're trying to have managed growth in Harrison, and I think we've made a lot of very good progress here on all these examples here.
Yeah, so I want to, quickly go back, the Department of Administration does publish population projections. It's obviously a model, a demographic model that they do. So they're not here on the ground, talking with people so much as looking at the data and making projections. And so the DOA released updated projections for the first time in like 10 years last year. And so those updated projections are going to be included in the plan. They project that by 2050, Harrison will have 21,000 people. And they project it out every 10 years from there. Now, there's things that can happen either to create more growth from a local governmental perspective or to create less growth, of course. And I think the goal from this plan was to allow a reasonable amount of growth understanding that if you completely restrict growth, there's other implications that come with that, like housing costs goes way up, and things like that. And so, yeah, we're not saying grow and develop anywhere you want. The idea is to hopefully allow that to be managed in a reasonable way that's fiscally responsible for the village by not kind of overextending utility and road needs and infrastructure needs. But also allowing that reasonable level of growth that maintains kind of the existing level of cost. And some of that comes to with allowing some of these mixed use, higher density, medium density type housing. And that's kind of how you balance out housing costs, while also not just completely opening up and free game for anyone who wants to build anywhere they want.
I do have a question. I understand what Scott is saying, and I agree with that because, when I look at the support services that are necessary to support the population that we have, law enforcement, the fire departments, school systems, parks, it would be kind of cool if we had some kind of an algorithm or whatever. We say, at this level, we can support this population. And I don't know how that all gets designed, but it just makes sense to me that we would have some kind of a target in mind. So we know how to, what services to complement the population before it's like, okay, now we need to add a full-time fire department or police department or whatever.
Yeah.
That and roads. I mean, what's our traffic patterns gonna look like? We had a meeting with local state representatives, and the DOT basically told us for a third time they have no long range plans to upgrade the infrastructure in this area. So we have to take that into account because the current traffic pattern to get outside the village to where people work, because they don't work in the village.
Sure.
The majority of people work outside the village. So KK and the 441 corridor is just, it's not going to be improved. The state DOT already said they don't have any long range plans to update or do anything about the current situation. So it's very hard for me to say, yeah, let's just throw up all this and that, the other thing, without thinking about the quality of life of people when they have to go to work and they have to sit on KK for 10 minutes just trying to get on 441. Or, yeah, I gotta leave work because I gotta go pick my kid up from school. I gotta pick him up and take him to the dentist, which is in Appleton. Because we only have one dentist office in the village, right? So these are the things that I think of.
Yeah.
Because I think I think we're discussing about the fact that KK is already deemed, what was the term they used?
And it was really done safe.
Yeah, it was insufficient or something like that. It was, so, we gotta think about these things and hopefully we improve the plan when we get some movement from the East Central Planning Commission and the state DOT to do some badly needed infrastructure upgrades. I think that would really help support this future land use map. So it's just,
I think that's what this land map does, though. This allows you to lie out and invest in your infrastructure based on the plan. Your areas that have higher or medium density, they're going to be more thoroughfares and they're going to have more traffic than your agricultural areas. And it allows you to take this map and put it with your HACR scores and your road condition scores and determine a 5-year plan for road replacement based on use, because you're going to see more traffic usage in this northern area of Harrison based on the density versus in the more rural areas, which won't need to be replaced as much. And I think this map can offer you that guidance that you're looking at of where you want to invest into improving infrastructure.
some of the county pays for the KK and the state pays for the state highways. We're told we're already not getting anything in the near future for any of those roads. So Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I'm like,
Those are outside of our control, though. This will allow us to plan for appropriate replacement and repair of infrastructure that the village owns and the village has control of. I understand that we can't do anything with KK or N or county properties. However, we can control what we want to be thoroughfares of the village, like the condition of Coop Road and Noe and things like that, and knowing the volume of traffic that we're gonna see on those roads to plan for the future.
yeah. And shit, industrial park, we work with our partner in Appleton because we don't own that road, we only own half of that. So that's always interesting as well, right? So, yeah. I'm just a numbers guy. I always
Yeah.
like to see
Sure.
numbers and how do you gauge yourself? How do you progress without knowing any quantifying numbers? Because I'm a numbers guy, right?
Sure.
An engineer, so I mean. It's always useful for me to see the numbers. Hey, we project, this is a good number, right? 2050, is this 21,000 based on this plan? Is that?
It's based on the historic and kind of projected growth. The state does, modeling to project population patterns and migration and things like that. And so they're not getting their hands on land use plans. I don't believe when they do those projections, they're more looking at
That would be a lot of work.
population models and things like that. And that's where I say, this plan has the ability to either constrain that number or make it larger depending on the types of policies that are put into place. And I certainly hear the concerns on transportation infrastructure. I will note that the counties identified in their comp plan, draft is available, has identified KK as one of KK and AP actually as the kind of the two key corridors that they know need addressing. I know East Central has both those corridors also on their safety action plan as corridors that need addressing. And I know the funding's not here, but having them in the plans is the first step to hopefully finding the dollars to make those changes. But
And just Calumet County not need to partner with Outagamie County on KK based on how that border breaks as well.
I believe they do. I don't know the exact agreements, but yeah, I believe they'll have to work with Outagamie. Yeah.
Yeah, the north half of that road is.
One of the things that also comes into factor in the growth in the population is our school districts. They're serving us. And as long as Kimberly continues to perform as it's doing academically, there's going to be always demand for houses in that portion of Harrison. Tacoma is getting better too, so you're going to see more call for residential in that portion of the village. So that's a big driver in our growth is the good schools.
Yep, it absolutely is. Good schools, quality of life, like we've already talked about, all of those things make a difference in people wanting to come and live here. The hope is that the plan sets up enough policies and smart growth standards that the quality of life is maintained. But certainly there's other things that are at play, schools that are kind of outside of the scope of this plan. Transportation issues are identified in this plan, but there is obviously greater partnerships and things like that need to be addressed.
So I guess what I would say is, since the planning commission has some other items to deal with tonight. If you have any, parting comments, otherwise if you think of something after you leave here, you want to get a hold of us, let Josh or I know, and send me an email with any comments, otherwise. We're just gonna go with kind of what we presented, and you'll be seeing this kind of updated for the June meeting, and hopefully, you can take it from there and we're.
Yes, and first of all, I want to say thank you for organizing the planning commission. It's good to see the new members and the prior members here to actually sit down and together and look at the plan and discuss things. I'm hoping that this new version, we don't have to do amendments to it that we've done in the past. That so please, like Chad said, give your feedback before. What do you need them by, like in 2 weeks or so?
2 weeks would be nice.
Okay, within the next 2 weeks, so that changes could be made. Is there still the availability of the public to, I'm sure this has all been published, is the public?
So this stuff will be put out on our website and shared with the public, with comments, but we've done questions over the. Sharing the public comments that were received from the survey and kind of the steps that were taken, so is Mitch's PowerPoint and the future land use map, the way it stands today, and the comments we received will all be available on both website and in Hamptons and PR.
Any other comments from the board?
No, we're good.
So, we have no new business on the agenda for the village board, and our next meeting is gonna be next Tuesday, May 27th. I'm gonna ask for a motion for the village board only to adjourn.
I make a wish we adjourn.
Second.
We need a roll call vote.
Hi.
Aye. Meeting adjourned for the village. Planning commission.
So at this time, I will make a motion to enter into the, reconvene the planning commission meeting to enter into the public hearing portion of the evening. Do I have a motion?
Makes motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. With that being said, we will move on to number 8, item A. Zoning map amendment for the rezoning for Dirk Stewart LLC, North Shore Road, East Highway 114, parcels 39,522 and 39,526.
Good, Josh.
Josh, do you want to provide us just a brief summary?
Sure. This is a proposal to rezone Forest Ridge preliminary plat, which is next on the agenda. The reason request is to change it from general A to single family residential suburban. And like I said, the plat itself is next on.
So just to confirm, there, I know there was, a comment about the entrance to possibly Highway 114, Old Highway.
And all those comments to the website, you know, address.
Sure, thank you.
So when you say single family suburban residential, does that align with low, medium, or high density?
Law that state.
So would that mean less than 4 class parcels per acre?
Yes, yes.
Are there any exceptions to that?
Any exceptions in the previous plan?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes, so the RS1 zoning district requires each residential lot to be greater than, or 12,000 square feet or greater. And the plat does meet that.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the zoning map amendment rezoning Dirks to Wood LLC North Shore Road. Highway 114 parcels 39522 and 39526 of printed and circulated.
I'll second that.
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. I will entertain a motion to exit the public hearing and reconvene into the regular meeting.
I'll make that motion to close the public hearing and reconvene to regular meeting.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to new business for discussion, consideration, and or possible action. So that brings us to A, the zoning map amendment, the rezoning of Dirk Stewart LLC, North Shore Road, Highway 114, I'm sorry, and that is parcels 39,522 and 39,526. this would be the portion in which if you have questions.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify that, that we're not allowed, there's not allowed to be an exit or entrance on the old highway 114.
Sorry to interrupt, we'll hold that to the next item. Can we just get I think you might have just voted on the zoning amendment, but if you wanna. Did you vote on it in the?
We did and shouldn't have.
We can carry that over if you want.
Any objections to carrying over the previous vote to the current amendment, which, or the current item A, which is where the vote should have taken place?
No.
So then we will move on to B, which is the preliminary plat for Forest Ridge subdivision. Dirk Stewart LLC, North Shore Road and N 114 parcels 39,522 and 39,526. So this would be the parcel map in your packets that outlines the potential mapping of the Forest Ridge subdivision.
So before we jump into questions by the commission members, I just want to kind of run through the some of the discussions that have happened since this plat originally came in. So the plat that was posted online, there has been changes to the plat. The plat that's before you is the current preliminary plat that the developers proposing to go with. The big change was the village had originally requested them to study whether that cul-de-sac that's surrounding lots 21 through 28 could be a circle drive versus a cul-de-sac, because the village public works department has concerns about snow plowing in there and where to place the snow without having to truck it out of there. So one of the discussions is kind of where the placement of the driveways go as part of the final plat process, so that we can have some snow storage areas to address that if it's going to stay as a coast. Where Decker Way is, that originally was a road with a dead end that deaded into the property to the east. The village doesn't ever see that road going through. So we requested the developer to reconfigure those lots and kind of connect that road up to Marie Drive. In doing so, we had asked for a public park area to be considered as part of Outlot 2. In the original plan, Outlot 2 was really specific to the stormwater detention pond. This plan gives it some additional street frontage space that could serve as a place for a small playground in the future as part of that. So Outlot 2 would be dedicated for both a stormwater pond and public park. The other kind of changes that have been made, there needs to be some further dialogue with the developer on sidewalks in this area. There is no sidewalks in the subdivision surrounding this. So putting sidewalks on both sides of the road may not make sense. So there's going to be some recommendations in the final plat to deal with that. There is a lot of wetlands in this area, and I know wetland concerns came up. There is a process that they have to go through to get these wetlands permitted in order to develop some of these properties. So the village policy is we do not issue building permits until all the wetland permits are obtained from the DNR to allow them to be able to build on these other properties that are affected by wetlands. We also have a ordinance that says that their stormwater discharge has to stay on their own property and not flood people downstream. So as our engineer McMahon is reviewing the drawings, they will make sure that those things are being handled properly with the engineering drawings for the subdivision. The other thing is the lots that front Old Highway Road, lots 1 through 13, lot 37, 39, and 65. The village is recommending that those be access restricted lots, and what that means is that they don't get that their egress is off of Marie Drive and Forest Run, versus in the 1 through 13 along Old Highway Road, there would be no driveways allowed onto Old Highway Road. It would all have to come to the center circulation area. Likewise, there's a highway setback, 50-foot highway setback line you can see on those lots 1 through 13. The DOT is probably not going to allow any kind of permanent structures in there. So a condition of approval is recommending that any permanent structures, berms or fences in those lots, that it's restricted. And that there's language on the plat that do not allow it, so we don't have people that are buying these lots coming to us and wanting to put fences in that area when we have no jurisdiction over that, because it's all DOT and they don't allow those types of things. The other change is lot one, next to all lot one. So all lot one is a stormwater detention pond. The village has seen that lot one be combined with all lot one, to have a future trailhead parking at this location. So the recreational trail that's planned from Menasha to the state park, Highco State Park, will go right by this property. So the goal would be to connect this subdivision with that trail and allow for the construction in the future of that, of a trailhead parking, so people could park there and get on the trail and go east or west, either to Menasha or to the state park, and kind of use this as the midpoint. So we're looking for that to be dedicated as parkland. There is a number of other requirements related to stormwater, erosion control, drainage, those types of things that are typical, but I think in a nutshell that takes care of a lot of the questions that we had. Now, there is comments that we received through the public process and tonight about lining up the roads. We did have that discussion in our pre-development meeting about lining up the roads. I would let the developer and or his engineer speak to that, but as I understand it, there was no way of lining up the road and having two entrances. And the fact that there's some unplatted lots along the North Shore Road that the developer does not have access to, particularly those lots to the south of lot 37. So it would be very difficult to try to line up the road and only have one entrance coming out of this subdivision for emergency purposes. So that was the reason. We realize it's not ideal. We have talked to first responders, we've talked to the fire department, and the police, and it's not ideal, but it's workable, I guess. The other comments that we received were related to parks, which I think I addressed. And then the DOT right away and having this come out onto 114 is probably not feasible with that being all in like state right away. So I think I've addressed it, and if there's any additional questions, we're happy to.
I have one question. Isn't there a Forest Run street in Sherwood?
Yes, sir.
So wouldn't this kind of cause confusion? For somebody who's doing the dispatch?
Yeah. Can I speak up?
Sure.
We're the current owners of the property, and with the developer, we asked that our family name be used in these streets. When we got this map shown to us, they had already put these street names in. We've requested that they change those to our parents' name and grandparents' name, and so we were promised by the developer that they would check into changing what you see on your map there to something that we're requesting as the current owners of the property.
Okay.
And one of the conditions of approval is that they have to verify with the county that there is no duplication of street names. So the final map will probably address
Okay.
the final plat.
Well, we're just really approving or not, we don't, the approving a plat map, we're not approving a street name, that's up to the village board, not up to,
But yeah, but if it causes a problem,
Yeah.
obviously those need to be addressed.
okay.
I have a question, just to clarify, you were asking for lot one to be dedicated as parkland and lot one, or?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm asking for lot one to be dedicated as part of all lot.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, and then the other question I had was along the existing roadway, North Shore Drive, is that going to be urbanized as the plot is, or is that going to remain ditch along there?
probably would be a ditch. And I would believe in the future, if it was repaved, it would be a mill and and milled off and repaved. I don't think, we don't have any plans to replant at this point.
Well, I guess the other thing I had was the hearing the comments and seeing some of them about the traffic and the people walking on the street is, would there be considerations to either widen the road, make it safer for walking or
We would have to look at that. I mean, obviously, we've got a lot of urbanizing road needs in the village. So, I mean, that's really gonna be up to the village board. There is, sidewalk being planned along the lots that have the frontage here so that it's least services and some of that, but it will, whether there's enough right of way to do any of that, I can't answer that.
Okay.
So is the current plan not to have curb gutter and sidewalk in the subdivision?
In the subdivision, yes, but not on North Shore Road.
Okay.
One more question, what? You have pond on the top and pond down on the bottom here, what way does that water flow out of these ponds? Does that flow? To the top pond by Old Highway Road and the intersection of that, does that go across? Or
Do you know that, Scott?
is that?
Yes, Chris.
Yes.
Everything flows to the south.
So that goes down, it will be running down the ditch, okay. Down, North Shore Drive, okay.
Can I ask a question quick? It's a simple, it's a clarification question.
Okay.
Okay, Chad, you're talking about Old Highway Road and that was brought up about the 50 feet. Is that off the current 114 or is that on off of Old Highway Road? Because 50 feet off of the center line of the current 114, what's that?
It's off of Old Highway Road.
So the state owns Old Highway Road?
Yes. It's a village, it's a joint to maintain road within state right of way. Yes,
So the state owns that road?
yep.
Okay. I was just curious out there. Thank you.
Chad, to clarify, what is the rationale as to why this can't be changed to a circle end versus a cul-de-sac?
There's issues with the grade. I think is that safe to say that there would be no way, there would be a lot of fill needed in order to do that?
Correct, yeah, with the going, even with the cul-de-sac, there's a substantial amount of fill that needs to be brought in. To maintain cover over the proposed storm sewer. And if you do an extra circle around there, there's additional road. Along with the fill to create that road to maintain the cover on the storm sewer.
So it's just an issue of bringing in fill, there's not a long-term issue?
And not a long-term issue with the developer. Like the layout of the cul-de-sac.
By adding the
Stability.
circle end, does that require you to shrink the size on any of these lots or eliminate any of these lots?
It actually creates more lots, but there'll be a lot smaller lots. They'll still be within the rules, but a lot of lots will become a lot smaller.
And they won't be the larger desirable
Right.
lots.
Everybody wants to have bigger lots and. You know.
And what was the difference between? How many lots would it have added?
72 and 665, 73.
The other thing that I would note on that is my rationale for having the developer dedicate lot one is in lieu of us. Having to deal with the snow plowing issue in that cul-de-sac. So since we didn't get our way of having the road around there the way we wanted to, I'm hoping that Scott is gonna be gracious enough to dedicate that lot for a future parking lot on lot one.
What is the snow storage solution? Are you gonna have larger terraces between the sidewalk?
I think the snow, so we'll be looking at that as part of the final design, but we'll be trying to kind of group the driveways hopefully together on those lots. And then the placement of the fire hydrants and stuff to make sure that we had ample area to put it. And talking with the public works, they believe we can work through that.
What is the standard terrace 4 feet?
I think it's 10 feet.
And then, I'm sorry, sir, you had a question?
Yeah, I got a question. It's kind of a safety thing and what he brought up with, North Shore Road. There is access to that property off of 114. Could the developers use that temporarily to do all their work and hauling gravel and dirt in? Until they're done and then. Surrender that culvert or that driveway, that would keep them off the.
So you're talking like a construction access
Yeah,
point,
just
and when the
do
development
construction.
is done, it would
That would keep
close.
them off North Shore. Road, basically completely until they're almost done. Cause it is a nice wide driveway. And it's solid.
I guess that would be
So it's
the
not
village
like I said,
manager, or the
We
village
can,
planner.
we can look into that and talk to,
Yeah, let's.
we're just gonna have to get approval from the DOT to probably do that, and I don't know if they're gonna grant it,
Yeah.
but we can try.
To put a tractor out there.
Everything the tractors.
Do that.
Chad, do you know what the per lot fee is for recreation? That goes towards recreational space?
It's a calculation that's done, it's in the development agreement, I can't remember off, I think it's based on $26,400 per acre of land, and it calculates it out by the number of lots, but I can't tell you, I haven't done the calculation. There would be that, if we would forgive that.
In lieu of lot
In
one.
lieu of the two, lot one and lot two, the space that we did.
No. Is there any other public questions, comments, or concerns? And Chad, you're looking for approval based on meeting the conditions, the 20 conditions that are outlined
Yes,
on the staff recommendations?
yes.
Yes, sir.
You were talking about that parking lot out there. That wasn't expressed in any plans, I don't think, other than the one brought up here, right?
Yes, that is new, yes.
Okay, that might be something the commission might wanna show to the people down there, because parking lots are not just used for trails. Like that, they're used for other things, especially if you're gonna make it that big of a parking area.
It's not gonna be big.
It's not gonna be that big.
Or,
Okay,
or cars.
but that might be something you might wanna express to people that are gonna be up there. Cause it's, if you're gonna say it's designated for a trail, I can guarantee you that those lights are actually made for trails. They're not being used just for trails, unless you put something on there like a law enforcement based thing where they're only used from this hour to this hour. And then it has to be happening, because I don't think that being a parking lot there for vehicles is gonna go over it.
I'm not familiar with the village's new ordinance or requirement posting for 30 days to get feedback on all new subdivisions. Does a change like this warrant it having to be reposted? Does it not based on that ordinance? I'm not familiar with the language of that ordinance.
So what would, if the board approves, it's a new process that we're learning, frankly. I think if the board approves the preliminary plat, we'll post the preliminary plat out there until we get through the final plat process. It will go away after that. You know, we really looked for public comments when it first, the plat came, and you know, I don't know how we're gonna handle the changes, but we can, you know, post the new plat out there as we move forward, but some of this stuff isn't even shown on this plat yet either. So,
And it's common to have changes to the plats throughout the
Absolutely.
development process. This is
Absolutely.
unique to this particular.
That's why it's called preliminary.
that's why we're preliminary plats.
Yeah, that's the way it's true definition.
Chad, with your vision of a parking lot there, I'm going to. In my mind, what I think you're planning on is very similar to what's either in Concana or combined lots. Kind of kitty corner from, Quick Trip on CE. It's. During the summer, I think there's a porta pot there, and it's got garbage bin, and maybe it takes literally 3 or 4 cars.
Correct. That's all it is.
Yes, ma'am.
So I brought up the concern earlier about the watershed, and it just came out that the water will shed to the south. The current one doesn't all shed to the south. So that's a concern in the cul-de-sac. is now having water run to the south. That's a wooded and field area, which then becomes our problem, because it's not part of this plot.
Chad, correct me if I'm misspeaking, but any water that is routed to an existing property owner and off of this development is the responsibility of the person that routed that water, and that the drainage maps need to reflect how that's water is gonna be cared for, so that it doesn't run onto existing property. And that needs to be approved, signed off on before occupancy permits can be issued for sale.
Yes.
Because that water should not be your problem
Correct.
and won't be your problem after development, if a development occurs.
And that is handled through through the village engineer reviewing the plans. Because we have ordinances in place.
So if there's no other public comment, I will entertain a motion to approve the preliminary plot map with taking into consideration 20 conditions outlined by village staff as reflected in the.
Nothing, motion to approve the preliminary plot. Forest Ridge subdivision, Jerk Stewart LLC, North Shore Road and Highway 114 parcels 39522 and 39526. With the 20 conditions presented by staff as printed and circulated.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Don't you want to amend that to include lot one?
That's listed in the 20.
Oh, that is in there?
Yes.
Number one,
Oh, no, number one you've got is outlot one.
no lot one shall be consolidated L lot.
Okay, all right. Let me start that, sorry about that. I'll second Mark.
So we have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Next item of business is C, certified survey map for Benjamin Elizabeth and Handel, W 6182 and W 6172 Brick Lane, which is parcels 46780 and 46782.
The applicant's looking to combine those two parcels. The southern portion of the land borders the railroad tracks. Both parcels are part of North Shore Ridge subdivision, which was created about 2 years ago. Directly to the east is the golf course, and then 2 residential lots to the north is Penfolds. Staff supports the proposed combination.
So my understanding is property owners own them both and would like to build a house in the middle.
Yes, and they can't stand up with
I'll make a motion to accept the zoning of parcels 39522, 395. What's your follows?
So you're gonna go see.
Yep, I will make a motion to accept the CSM for parcels 46780 and 46782 on Brick Lane.
And I'll second. Do we have any public comment on that item? We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Item D, report for March 2025 and April 2025 zoning. It's included in your packets.
So what I would just say is, since we didn't have a meeting in April, every month we bring forward a report just to give you an update of where the village is at, related to building permit issuances. So you can see from the March report, the numbers of permits that were issued. A lot of people typically look at the single family numbers, so there was 11 permits of single family year to date, was kind of 20, for a value of about $10 million. On the April report, there was 8 single family homes at about 4.2 million for 14 million. There was a number of commercial permits that were issued that roughly about $10 million. And those commercial permits included the Shell station at AK and County End. Some blue houses and greenhouses, a mini warehouse building, and a church addition to the Mount Calvary Church. So that's just a report of kind of where we are compared to last year for the commissions.
Are there any questions by the commission related to the report? Moving on to item E, implementation of multi-code meeting voting for future meetings.
So the village board has gone away from the majority of the village board has gone away from paper agendas. And went to, I showed the new member and he showed Scott in Michael, the online version of this. The goal would be to try to get the planning commission out of the paper era as well. And go to Municode, which is a software that the village board uses. The Municode is an online portal that allows the clerk to take votes through the thing, so a screen comes up and you vote on it on your screen on an electronic device. The question I guess I have for the commission is, is there interest in doing that? And if there is, would you be willing to use your personal cell phone if we help you get the login to it to just vote? Or do you require some kind of tablet? We could purchase tablets if we had to, like we did for the village board, for the members, and when you cease to be a member, you turn it in. But it's a very easy login, and you just vote for each item electronically versus the voice vote. So that's the discussion that the board is wanting me to have with the planning commission about trying to get more electronic.
I guess I'd have a question, if we're using our own devices, is that subject our devices to any open records laws?
Unfortunately, yes.
Then I would want you to provide me a tablet. Okay.
I'm
Again.
of the favor of remaining with paper at this point, not that it's not open for discussion in the future. I think we have several new members of the commission, and getting used to our processes and policies might be easier at this point. I understand there's benefits for keeping meeting minutes and voting and things of that nature, and I'm just one of many. But I also would not use my personal device and subjected to records requests.
In respect to the printed documents, I like the printed copies because as we went on here today, I can make notes on the maps of different developments, and I've been asked a lot of questions in the last couple. I've been on a planning commission 5 years now, and the last 5 years I've used a lot of documents from the planning commission and meeting people and showing this is what I mean here, and having that physical thing with me versus online is just a lot easier to use, user friendly.
Well, why don't we table it for now, and we'll revisit it in maybe 6 months and see where we're at.
Would you like that in a formal motion that it be tabled to be brought back, or since it was just for discussion? So with that being said, our next meeting is set for a tentative date of June 17 at 6 p.m. That will be based on needed agenda items to be addressed. Last is motion for adjournment, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
You have a motion, do we have a second?
A second.
We have a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. 0.